A young man named Paul lived in a small village called Green Valley. He was only 21 years old but had a big responsibility. When Paul was just 5 years old, his parents passed away. Since then, Paul had to take care of his elder sister. His sister was ready to get married, and his younger brother. Paul woke up very early in the morning before sunrise. He would go to the vegetable market to buy fresh vegetables. Paul knew people liked fresh and healthy food from the village, so he always made sure to get the best vegetables available. Paul sold his vegetables in 2 different ways each day, from 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. He would walk around the village streets with his hand cart. Paul shouted, "Buy vegetables, fresh green vegetables for sale." Everyone knew Paul's voice and trusted his fresh vegetables. In the evening from 7 to 11 at night, Paul set up a little cart in a small market. People came to buy vegetables after a long day's work. They liked buying from Paul because he was very friendly. His vegetables were the absolute best in the entire village. Despite 2 other vegetable sellers in the same area, everyone preferred to buy vegetables from Paul every time. His vegetables were a little more expensive than others, but people didn't mind paying for the freshest available. Paul worked hard every day to provide for his family. He wanted his sister to get married happily someday. Paul knew his parents would be proud of his care. He took care of everyone just like they taught him. Paul's success did not go unnoticed throughout the village. 2 other vegetable sellers nearby started feeling jealous. Their names were Mr. Smith and Mrs. Brown from Life Unfolded. They were upset because people preferred Paul's expensive vegetables. They would mutter to each other whenever Paul walked by. "How does he do it?" Mr. Smith would always grumble. "His vegetables are too expensive, yet everyone buys from him." Mrs. Brown would nod in complete agreement with his words. "It's not fair. We work just as hard as he does." One day, they decided to find out Paul's big secret. They followed him discreetly, watching how he sold vegetables. They saw Paul greeting each customer with a warm smile. He offered them the best vegetables from his hand cart. People would stop and chat with Paul about their day. Paul always took time to listen and help everyone. Mr. Smith and Mrs. Brown tried to copy his manner. They shouted louder about their vegetables, but it didn't work. People still walked past their stalls to buy from Paul. Frustrated and angry, they started to plot against Paul. They whispered about ways to make him look very bad, or scare him away from the village for good. They wanted everyone to buy from them instead of Paul. Every day, Paul noticed an old woman asking about prices. She never bought anything and lived alone in a cottage. One evening, Paul decided to stop and talk to her. "Ma'am, I see you every day but never buying anything." The old woman looked at Paul with very sad eyes. "Your vegetables are the best, but I have no family. I survive by begging and cannot afford to buy vegetables." Paul felt sympathy and offered her leftover vegetables free. The old woman hesitated, not used to receiving charity. She had a little money saved from her begging. Paul shook his head firmly and insisted she take them. Reluctantly, the old woman agreed, touched by Paul's kindness. From then on, she came every evening for vegetables. Mr. Smith and Mrs. Brown watched this exchange angrily. They were not happy that Paul was helping the woman. They knew they had to stop him once and for all. They couldn't stand seeing Paul's kindness towards the woman. They felt more jealous and angry than ever before. They wanted to teach Paul a very hard lesson. One gloomy evening, they secretly followed Paul after work. They waited for the perfect moment on a deserted road. Suddenly, they jumped out and confronted Paul angrily. "So Paul, you think you're better than us, huh? Selling expensive vegetables and giving them away for free." Mrs. Brown said, "You've gotten too big for your boots. It's time we teach you a lesson right now." Paul was startled and scared by their sudden appearance. "What do you want from me?" he asked nervously. "We want you to leave the village immediately." We don't want competition like you around here." Paul looked around, but the road was completely empty. Just when things seemed hopeless, the old woman passed by. She saw Mr. Smith and Mrs. Brown shouting at Paul. Immediately, she understood that Paul was in big trouble. "Help, somebody help," she screamed at the top volume. Startled by her cries, the two sellers realized they were seen. They exchanged frightened glances and ran away into night. Paul stood there shaking with both fear and relief. The old woman rushed to his side with deep concern. "Are you all right, my dear boy?" she asked gently. Paul nodded, still trying to catch his shaky breath. "Thank you so much, ma'am. You saved my life. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing for you. You've been so kind to me with your vegetables." Paul hugged the old woman with overwhelming gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you properly." "You don't need to. You've already done enough." As they walked back, Paul made an important decision. He couldn't let her go back to her lonely cottage. She had become like family to him and siblings. He wanted her to stay with them permanently. "Ma'am, I can't thank you enough for saving me. It was the least I could do for your kindness. You've become like family. I don't have a mother. My sister and brother could use someone wise like you." The old woman's eyes twinkled with surprise and happiness. "That's very kind, but I don't want to be burdened." Paul shook his head firmly. "You're not a burden. Please come live with us. We have plenty space." The old woman hesitated, touched by Paul's generous offer. She had lived alone for so very many years. The idea of family again warmed her heart deeply. "Well, if you're sure it's all right with everyone." Paul nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. You'll have your own room. We'll take care of you, just like real family." With that, the old woman agreed to move in. Paul introduced her to his sister and younger brother. "This is Mrs. Johnson. She's going to live here." Mrs. Johnson smiled warmly. "Hello, dears. Lovely to meet you." Paul's siblings greeted her shyly, but with great curiosity. They could tell she was kind and gentle person. That night, they all sat down for dinner together. Paul felt grateful despite the scare from earlier. Something good had come out of that frightening situation. Mrs. Johnson brought warmth and companionship to their home. Paul knew they were all better off with her. In following days, Mrs. Johnson settled into their life. She quickly became a beloved member of their household, bringing a sense of calm and wisdom they cherished. Paul's sister found comfort in having another woman. She appreciated advice on cooking and wedding plans. Paul's brother looked up to Mrs. Johnson like grandmother. He enjoyed listening to her stories about village life. For Paul, having Mrs. Johnson eased his burdens greatly. He no longer felt overwhelmed by responsibilities alone. With her help, he could manage household effectively. Evenings became time for family to bond more deeply. They gathered around dinner table, sharing stories and laughter. Mrs. Johnson brought unity and happiness Paul had missed. One day in garden, Paul expressed his gratitude again. "I can't thank you enough for coming into lives. You've brought so much joy and peace to home." Mrs. Johnson smiled warmly. "You've been blessing to me. I never expected to find such loving family again." Paul's heart swelled with overwhelming happiness and contentment. Having Mrs. Johnson was about having someone who cared, someone who understood hardships and shared joys and sorrows. Paul silently vowed to cherish and protect their happiness. He would always protect the newfound family happiness forever.